to share. And we'll begin the presentation here. So thanks everybody for attending this online PIC for the Angus Infrastructure Master Plan Class EA Addendum. And we'll dive right in here and with the presentation. If you have any comments or questions, please just drop them in the chat. You can also send them directly to my co-host Kirsten McFarlane, and we'll address any questions, comments at the end of the presentation, which should be about half an hour here. So without further ado, we'll get into it. So just for some background here, the Township of Essa completed an Infrastructure Master Plan, or IMP, for Angus in September of 2022, which identified preferred servicing solutions for water, wastewater, transportation, and stormwater infrastructure to support development over the next 25 years. Angus currently has a water supply capacity shortfall of about 350 equivalent units relative to the wastewater capacity, so slightly more wastewater capacity than water capacity, as well as some inadequate fire flows in a few areas. So there's a total water supply deficit of about 4.6 million liters per day, and a water storage deficit of about 4,200 cubic meters of storage required to meet the long-term population demand, which the IMP looked at a 2046 horizon. And to prioritize the township's progress towards implementing these solutions, this addendum to the IMP is being completed. And the addendum specifically focuses on water supply and storage. We didn't have any issues, I don't think, with the other elements. We just needed to get a bit more detail on these particular issues via an addendum. So the IMP recommended the following water supply and storage solutions. In the short term, to increase the current permits to take water and well capacity to supply as much of that 4.6 million liters a day as we can, and long term to develop new wells either at an existing location with expanded treatment, booster pumping, storage, and fire flows. Okay, so the IMP was required some additional technical analysis to validate and confirm the details of the preferred solutions. So this was the main purpose of the addendum. So again, we're trying to prioritize and validate the water supply and storage strategies to address the immediate growth demands in Angus. And throughout this study, we revisited and reevaluated the IMP water supply and storage solutions by incorporating new data, field studies, and concept designs to help facilitate effective implementation. So, as part of this addendum, we conducted additional investigations to assess well capacity and determine feasibility for ultimate build-out. And we also assessed the appropriateness of the different water storage solutions, so in-ground versus elevated tank. And we again looked at multiple tanks versus single tank solution within the context of some additional field work to check the space that exists at the sites that we were considering. So the other main component of this study was to address the current servicing gaps in water supply and storage that I mentioned before. So our problem and opportunity statement for the addendum began with the IMP. It identified water supply and storage options, acknowledging that no single solution was able to fully address the long-term needs. So this addendum was focused on prioritizing and evaluating the immediate water supply and storage strategies to support current and near-term growth. It also involved additional hydrogeological studies to assess the well capacity expansion. And we examined, again, different water storage solutions and attempted to confirm the pre-design and technical requirements that we weren't quite able to get to in the original IMP. So the IMP itself was a Schedule B environmental assessment prepared in accordance with the municipal Class EA process. and the alternative solutions were evaluated, selected, and recommended for implementation. So this addendum just revisits and expands on that previous evaluation process. And down below there, we have just the description of Schedule B projects. So I'm not going to read everything on these slides just because there is quite a bit of information here. But the slides are available to download on the township's website. And I imagine we'll send an email out after this presentation to get everybody a copy of that link as well. So this is just a figure showing the EA process. We're in stage 2 of the process where we are going to public consultation. And from here, we're going to select our preferred solutions after implementing any comments or changes from the public process and finalizing our report to issue for a 30-day review period. So the study area has not changed for this addendum. We're still looking at the boundaries of Angus here with an existing population of about 13,700 people. It is the primary settlement for Essa Township and a complete community with a mix of municipal services and facilities. And again, the majority of growth in Essa is going to be directed towards Angus, so it's important that we take a close look at the servicing requirements here. So again, this just again summarizes our existing population and the associated equivalent residential units and the projections for the future population, which is about 22,000 people or close to 7,400 units. So existing municipal systems include about 62 kilometers of water main. There's 3 existing well sites, each with a pump station and reservoir, and a water supply residual capacity of roughly 599 equivalent residential units. And the water storage is currently beyond the 80% capacity threshold. So there's about 1,000 cubic meters of residual capacity, but we need roughly 5,000 right now just for the current population. So usually that 80% number is your trigger for an EA process. That's when you need to start looking at your new solutions. So that's part of why we're here today. So again, the ultimate water supply requirement is an increase of about 4,635 cubic meters per day, which is 1 million liters per day, or 4.6 million liters. And the water storage amount that we need for future development to that ultimate population is about 4,200 cubic meters. So another, again, this is from the IMP. We were looking at meeting a fire flow of 150 liters per second, which is in the current township standard for all areas, but that was found to be technically not feasible without some significant upgrades based on a lot of areas of town that were designed to a much lower standard of 37 liters a second historically. So again, this is still coming from the original IMP. We were targeting rather 100 liters per second fire flow standard for existing and future residential areas. And even at that level, there's failures of about 24 out of the 300 or so locations in our model that we're unable to meet that 100 liters per second fire flow. And just for information, everything still is beyond that original lower standard of 37. I think under this scenario, the lowest one was somewhere around 45 or 46. So we still have that grandfathered minimum, but we need to improve things here. So our evaluation process, this is just a rundown of that. We looked at a number of different detailed impacts for each of our shortlisted alternatives and ranked them against each other in relative terms in terms of these criteria here. So the first one was natural environment impacts, which includes impacts to vegetation, wildlife, the natural environment, and surface and groundwater quality and quantity impacts, which is significant certainly for an important thing to consider certainly for water supply when we're looking at groundwater options here. So we also looked at social, cultural, environment impacts, which include land use, archaeological considerations, requirements for complicated intermunicipal agreements and infrastructure, visual landscape and aesthetic impacts, as well as interruption to residents primarily during construction, as part of our considerations. And then on the technical operational side, we looked at the difficulty to construct or implement options relative to each other, and operation and maintenance efficiency. And then on the economic impacts, we looked at capital and construction costs, as well as flexibility and phasing, and long-term operation and maintenance cost burdens associated with each of the options. So the evaluations process began with a preliminary screening. Um, Essentially, we applied this set of questions to each of our options, our long list of options, and if the options passed each of these screening questions, then we were able to move that option on to detailed evaluation using this evaluation process from the previous slide. And if options were not able to pass the screening questions, then they were eliminated from further consideration. And so these were pretty high-level questions. So can the solution actually satisfy our problem statement? That was the first one. If it can't solve the problem, there was no sense in reviewing it further. Did the solution have detrimental impacts in any of these major categories that we were looking at, which would, for example, prohibitive costs or land requirements or difficulty? And if it did have impacts, then can those impacts be mitigated? So, every solution is going to have some impact. So, that third question was sort of included to ensure that we weren't giving anything an unfair shake here. So our long list of options here, I'm not going to go into all the details of every single one of them, but we had 6 different options on the water servicing side, the water supply side. So option 1 was to increase capacity at Mill Street Well 1. Option 2 was to rehabilitate Center Street Wells 2 and 3. Option 3 was to replace Center Street wells 2 and 3. 4 was to increase water taking at Brownlee, which is well 5. And option 5 was to develop a new well, well 1A at Mill Street. And then option 6 was to develop a completely new well at a new site. So there's advantages and disadvantages to each of these. You can see option 2 and 4 were eliminated due to a variety of issues that they weren't able to pass those screening questions. And also each of these options has sort of a different ability to provide water. So some of them are more viable than others. Some of them, again, from the original IMP, we found that we weren't able to get to that 4.6 million liters a day using just one of these options. So again, the long list of water supply options here for this addendum was more focused on providing near-term alternatives that would be beneficial to development. So we'll get into that more in our detailed evaluation slides. So as far as new well fields, as part of the hydro-G investigations that were done for this addendum, we did look at potential well sites at Mill Street again. So this is for new wells, which is an existing municipal well. We looked at a well site south of there at the intersection of certain geological features near the Circle Pine Golf Course, and then a final one down at the south end of 20th Side Road. So these options were all hydrogeologically found to be potentially viable. The ones further south of Mill Street are not currently used for water supply, so more significant investigations would need to be done there to verify those sites. As well as at Mill Street, we would need to do some flow testing and other tests to confirm the viability of that option. So No pumping tests were completed as part of this addendum, but any that are required were considered in the evaluation. So again, this table just gives a summary of our short list of water supply options, so you can see sort of the differences between the different supply options as far as the liters per day that we imagine could be provided. The one that was kind of the closest to getting us to that 4.6 million was this option of a new well 1A at Mill Street, which was in again subject to some field testing and pump testing to confirm somewhere in the ballpark of potentially 4.4 million. So we're pretty close there. And this again, this modeling wasn't completed as part of the original IMP, so it was good that we were able to flesh this out a bit. We've also got the timeline to approval for each of the different options. They're all pretty similar within a few months of each other. But the capital costs vary quite a bit, and we also looked at the costs from a dollars per meter cube of water supply perspective, because that's an important metric to consider here, rather than just the capital cost. And as you can maybe deduce from the numbers here, option W5 came out ahead as on that metric. So we'll see more about that in the detailed evaluation here. Again, so this is just a map showing where those shortlisted options are located. So you can see the Mill Street well, and we also showed where the storage is in this figure. So this is our detailed table, evaluation table rather, for the water supply options. So we did a color-coded approach here. Certain impacts are rated a little more highly than others. So I believe on the water supply side, the environmental impacts are evenly rated. The main one that's different is oh, sorry, having trouble here. On the economic impacts, for example, the capital cost was rated slightly higher than the other two options. But overall, I believe environmental impacts were 30%, social cultural were 20, technical operational were 20, and then economic was 30. So that's effectively how it was broken down. And again, just on this, the comment I made before about the return on investment for water supply on a per meters cube per day basis. You can see option 5 here is $506 per cubic meter per day of supply, whereas some of the other options are in the 2,000 to 3,000 ballpark. So quite a bit more expensive per meter cubed of supply. And again, I'm not going to go through all the details of this evaluation. The color coding kind of gives the high level breakdown of it. But what we concluded was that our highest priority option was investigating this Mill Street well 1A and constructing a new well at Mill Street. So effectively, there's a number of studies that need to be done. There is a former landfill next to that site. However, it is a current municipal well, so we don't have too much concern because that well is operating and there's no issues. But there is going to need to be some additional investigations into that just to make sure that everything's good there. But in general, that's considered our highest priority option. That's going to get us most of our flow, most of our supply at the lowest cost and with the least overall impacts, and with the least interruptions to residents and so forth. The most complicated option was developing a new well field at a new site, simply because there's a lot of investigative work and agreements and so on that would need to be done in order to verify that option. And given the promising nature of our Mill Street option, it doesn't seem reasonable to pursue those costs at this time. So beyond that, replacing Center Street is, or rather, sorry, increasing Mill Street well 1 itself could potentially get us the rest of the way. But if that's not possible, then we may need to look at replacing Center Street. However, if we can get that substantial amount of flow from a new Mill Street well, then those options are going to be quite far down the road if they do need to be explored at some point in the future. So again, yeah, so our preferred option involves a phased approach, but option 5 is considered our highest priority immediate solution based on this evaluation. And again, all these slides will be online. So that takes us to our water storage options. So option 1 was to create, or sorry, rather to provide storage at a single location, and option 2 was to provide it at 2 locations, and option 3 was at 3 locations. So the locations we looked at for these options, this is, sorry, again, from the original IMP evaluation. This was based on some modeling that was done fairly high level. After some more detailed modeling and some site investigations that were completed as part of this addendum, we found that there were some fairly significant challenges with constructing new storage at the Brownlee and Center Street locations. There's some space limitations there, some limitations on expanding the existing systems. So essentially, one system at Mill Street was looking a lot more promising. So again, here's the breakdown of all the options that were explored under this kind of subcategory of using a single storage system. So again, just this, we applied the screening to this, and there was some significant challenges both from space and economic perspective. As you can imagine, building 2 or 3 water towers is going to be, or in-ground storage is going to be a lot more expensive than just building one that's suited to the long-term growth. So as part of this evaluation, we again took that after we screened out the multiple site option, we went to 6 different options for single site water storage. So the first of those was in-ground storage at Mill Street, expanding the existing reservoir. The second option was constructing an elevated storage tank at Mill Street. Third option was elevated storage at Brownlee. Fourth was new storage at a greenfield site, as yet to be determined, in the south of Angus, and a new greenfield site in the northeast of Angus. And we modeled both of those options for good measure, just to see how it would affect the required upgrades of water main to get to that 100 liters per second fire flow. And finally, we looked at storage at Center Street. So again, the Center Street and Brownlee sites were eliminated just due to the insufficient space at those sites from our field evaluations. And the new storage in the Northeast was eliminated because it was very similar to the South Angus option, but with a number of additional challenges and limitations, both technical and land acquisition wise. So it was eliminated, but we did keep the WS4 1.4 option greenfield in for the detailed evaluation. So again, this is our summary of options and our potential locations for these options shown again. And storage volume is the same for all of them. All options require 4,200 cubic meters. Sorry, I just need a sip of water here. And the timelines to approval vary a little bit more on these. The in-ground storage at Mill Street was 31 months. The elevated storage was about 26, and the South Angus option was a bit unknown, likely the same time for construction as the Mill Street option, plus an unknown amount of time associated with land acquisition and also cost associated with the land was different. So the elevated storage option was a little bit less costly than the in-ground storage option, as you can see here too. And this is our overall evaluation table for the three shortlisted options on the storage side. So again, the servicing strategy that won out here was Mill Street, and in this case, the elevated storage. There is a slight capital benefit on the in-ground storage side. However, the maintenance is slightly higher burden and higher energy cost due to the pumping that would be required, whereas the elevated storage would provide some static pressure that doesn't require nearly as much of a pump burden to provide those fire flows because you've got that nice elevation providing pressure to the system for firefighting. Um, and again, the two Mill Street options were fairly similar in a lot of other regards. It was really the maintenance and the energy cost associated with the pumping of the in-ground reservoir that was the sort of make or break there. And the new site was less preferred, just again because there's quite a bit of unknowns in that situation. And the greenfield site would certainly require a lot more cost uh, for land acquisition, for the studies, and the new sites were at least 1 to 200 meters away from existing systems, so you'd have that additional pipe work that would be required as well to connect to the existing water system. So option WS2 was our preferred option, which was the construction of a new elevated storage tank at Mill Street. Um, and again, this 4,200 cubic meter solution would give us the full build out storage requirement. So we're not going to have to go in and build more storage at a different time at a higher cost. And just on the right hand side here, you can see sort of the conceptual site plan that was developed as part of the IMP during the field investigations as part of the field investigations and concept designs that were completed for the addendum. So overall, our preferred servicing option for near-term implementation was to increase Angus's water supply by the addition of this new well at Mill Street, which was option W5. We wanted to provide, or rather, we believe this option will provide approximately 4,400 cubic meters per day of additional supply, which would support approximately 1,600 new additional residential units beyond the current residual capacity. And again, that's subject to some wastewater improvements because there's currently that servicing deficit between the water and wastewater. And then the storage option that was preferred was, again, to construct that elevated tank at Mill Street. And although additional supply options may be required for long-term growth at this point, those supply options are not suggested to be explored further at this time, simply because they will have significantly higher costs. And later when we know where we're at after implementing this option, it would be much better to begin investigating those if we need to. So the next steps in the project are to incorporate any comments we have from this PIC and from agency circulations into the final concept option selection. Then we will finalize our addendum summary report and publish our notice of addendum. So that Class EA addendum report would then be placed on file with the ministry and township for public review for a period of 30 days. And following completion of that 30-day period, subject to no Part 2 orders, we would then begin moving forward towards approvals for these projects. And as part of that process, we would need to initiate some of the hydrogeological investigations and the environmental testing for the water supply solution, and initiating detailed design for both solutions as well. So that is the end of the presentation. So I guess now we will open it up to questions. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat yet.
We haven't received any questions yet, but we can give our listeners here a couple minutes if they have anything that they would like to ask if anything comes up. Otherwise, of course, they can contact either of our contacts on the screen there. That will also be on the slides posted online.
Yep, it will all be available online as well. That's correct. Okay, not seeing any questions here. So if there's no further questions, I guess we will stop the recording here at this point. And thank you everybody for attending. And again, yeah, if you don't want to submit questions now, certainly take your time to review the presentation materials that are posted on the township website. And we can you can submit any questions you have to myself or John Kolb, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. All right. Thanks again, everybody. We will have this presentation running again in about 20 minutes time if anybody wants to stay for the next pass.